Hi, this is Jessica, and I wanted to present some basic beginner tips and techniques on the KISS Loom. I have here in front of me a compact KISS Loom. If you have a regular, it will look different, but the principles will be basically the same. The compact is different because the pegs are perpendicular to the pins. With a regular, the pegs will be parallel to the pins. I'm going to demonstrate how to do the E-wrap, but first I'm going to show you how you would normally do it, like you're used to on the Nifty Knitter or the Martha Stewart loom. You would just be E-wrapping pegs. But since the KISS loom is so unique, you're going to have to do things a little bit differently. You'll have to go behind the pin, wrap around the peg, 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 behind the pin, and wrap around the peg. Now, I'm going to show you how to go the other way. But first, I'm going to push these stitches down. This ensures that they don't pop off when I get ready to go in the other direction. Now, when I go in the other direction, I'm going to wrap the peg behind the pin, 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 and wrap the peg. Now I push them down again. You go in between the pegs and the pins to push the material down. Then you gently lift the bottom loop away from the peg and then up and over. This helps to reduce the chance of you losing the top stitch. You lift the bottom one away and then up over, and that keeps you from losing the top stitch. And you just repeat that process for every loop that you're going to knit off. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that we're keeping the knitted loop between the peg and the pins. Don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, I've got to go behind the pins, so I need to put the loop behind the pins. You don't need to do that right now. That's not going to be necessary because the fabric will eventually come through the pins and flow down the back. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that when you are knitting, especially when you're new to the KISS loom, it's going to look like these loops are not connected. It's not going to look like the Nifty Knitter where you can look at the back of it and see your knitting. The knitted material is going to be on the inside between the pegs and pins, and it's going to take several rows before you see your material start to look like knitted fabric. It's going to take at least an inch or two before you really see it come down through the back. Now I'd like to show you a different technique. So I'm going to demonstrate the U-stitch without the E-stitches being below it. You go behind the pin in front of the peg without twisting, without E-wrapping. Behind the pin in front of the peg. And you do that for as many stitches as you want. If you're going to do a tube, then you would do the entire loom. This is just one side of the loom. And then when you get to the point where you want to go back, you skip the first one. Well, sorry about that, you push all of them down. Then you skip the first one and go back the way you came. Behind the pin in front of the peg. 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 And I'm not used to knitting at this angle, so alright, and now you lift the bottom loop away from the peg and then up over the top. Lifting away from the peg helps to make sure you don't lose the top stitch, because there's no knob at the top of the peg like the Nifty Knitter has. So you lift away and then up and over. Away and up and over. And you want to make sure that you are putting your knitted stitch between the pegs and the pins, not behind the pins. The material will eventually flow behind the pins. Right? And now you would just continue to repeat that process, skipping the first peg when you're using the U-stitch and going back the way you came. I also really quickly wanted to show that when you make your slip knot, you can either put it on a peg or a pin, especially if you're not going to be knitting on these. I find that if you're going to be knitting on the peg or pin, or right next to the peg or pin that you put it on, then you have to lift the knitted fabric away in order to lift the slip knot off once you've knitted a couple of inches. I also find that sometimes it's useful to use one of the ends of the screws and then work with the pegs and pins. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about yarn guides. You probably noticed that I'm using a ballpoint pen with the ink removed. You may think that, well, I didn't need a yarn guide with the Nifty Knitter, but it's really, really valuable. You'll go much faster. You have much better control over the yarn. You'll be less likely to have really, really tight stitches. You can still have tight stitches if you don't make sure that your yarn has plenty of slack on it, but it's much easier and much faster to wrap with the yarn guide. And you can play around with it. You can try different types of pins as yarn guides. And also I'd like to talk about hooks. You've probably noticed that I'm using the wooden pick from the KISS Looms website, but we actually modified and put a different pick on the end than what came with it. And I'd like to show you what actually came with the wooden hook and what we did. These are the hooks that came with the wooden tool from KISS Looms. This is your knitting and this is your purling. And we found that we wanted something, especially with the compact, we wanted something that could be smaller but still have the strength and the comfort of the wooden handle. So we took a broken Nifty Knitter hook, and we took the metal out and put masking tape on it and then put it into the wooden handle. And so we can still change it out for the other picks. And this is a separate purchase. You have to buy this separately from the hooks that come with the looms, but I think it's well worth the investment, especially since you can modify it if you find a pick that you like using better. You can simply switch it out. that concludes my basic beginner KISS Loom video, and if you have any questions or feedback, please let me know. Thank you for watching.